Welcome to my Pecha Kucha presentation about creating multimedia lessons. Clark and Mayer define multimedia presentations as any presentation containing words such as narration or on-screen text, and graphics such as illustrations, photos, animation, or video. It was noted after conducting a study that rural teachers ratify that students learn best and their interest increases when interacting with multimedia materials, despite the limited computer resources available at rural schools and homes. This is reason to help promote technology in our schools. I will not attempt to show you everything about multimedia lessons in this presentation, but I will highlight a few that stand out to me. First, pre-training is important when presenting new or complex terms. When learners are presented with complex terms prior to seeing them in graphic, it helps them process without overloading the learner's cognitive. Lynn states, one approach is to provide students with pre-training in how to engage in text-picture processing. Beyond pre-training, we will look at the following principles: multimedia, continuity, modality, redundancy, coherence, personalization, and engagement. The multimedia principle tells us that we need to present text with relevant graphics. If a person can connect a graphic with text, they are more engaged in the learning process and should retain more knowledge. Be careful not to just include graphics because they are cute. Extraneous graphics can actually hinder the learning. The continuity principle 1 suggests that we align text to graphics. If learners have to scroll or continuously move locations to relate text to graphics, it could cause extraneous load in the lesson, which leads to decreased learning. With a detailed graphic, consider including the words in the graphic rather than a separate legend. Continuity principle 2 suggests we synchronize spoken words with corresponding graphics. If graphics and narration are not synchronized, it could cause extraneous load and result in loss of learning. Whether you are creating your own lesson or using one available to you, check for one link for graphics and narration. The modality principle tells us to choose audio narration rather than on-screen text to describe graphics. On-screen text describing graphics could overload the visual channel, resulting in possible decreased learning. Audio narration synced with graphics uses the visual and the auditory channels, which could prevent an overload. Redundancy principle 1 warns us not to have narration and the same on-screen text together. It is believed that learners will pay more attention to the written text and not enough to the graphic. The written text and graphic could cause overload in the visual channel, whereas narration along with graphic would not cause the overload. Redundancy principle 2 lets us know that there are special situations where redundancy is allowable and will not overload the visual channel. Some of those situations are if there is no pictorial presentation, on-screen text is part of the graphics, select key terms are presented through text, and if the verbal text is complex. Coherence principle warns us not to use extra materials. Principle 1 warns against extra words, Principle 2 warns against extra graphics, and Principle 3 warns against extra audio. Including extra words, graphics, and audio can be distracting and cause disruptions in the learning process. In this case, less is more. Many teachers play soft music throughout the day, thinking that it helps students learn. The coherence principle lets us know that even soft music can hinder the learning process because it can overload the auditory channel. When teaching, keeping it simple is best. Personalization principle tells us that the voice and appearance are important. Clark and Mayer suggest we use the following polite wording rather than direct: human voice instead of machine, and human-like gestures and movements. We need human interaction even when taking online lessons. Engagement is important. Clark and Mayer explain that there are two forms of engagement. They are psychological and behavioral. Psychological refers to cognitive processing, and behavioral refers to actions taken by the learner. Many educators believe if learners are actively engaged in the learning process, that they are learning. This is not always the case. Some games and activities can actually hinder the learning process if it is not psychologically engaging. If a game causes the learner to use cognitive learning, promotes learning. Psychological engagement is what leads to learning, not behavioral. Some teachers believe that the busier students are with activities such as taking notes during a presentation means they will learn more. According to rules about engagement, busy students do not mean they are engaged in the learning process, it just means they are busy. When trying to find activities for students to do that promote the learning process, teachers should create or search for activities that will engage the psychological more than behavioral. Perhaps provide the students with a teacher-produced outline rather than asking the students to produce their own outline after a presentation. Curie tells us the development of elementary school students is currently surrounded by the digital world, so it affects the way they respond to learning. Even though our students are accustomed to living in the digital world, it is our job as educators to help them find the right tech tools that will promote learning. There are a lot of principles and rules to remember and use when creating lessons and learning opportunities, but we owe it to our students to try and promote as many of them as possible to engage our students in the learning process. These principles can be applied to any subject and should be to give our students the best opportunity possible. Thank you for listening to my presentation. I hope that you saw at least one thing that you will try in your next lesson. Enjoy teaching through multimedia and helping your students reach their full potential.